today, but I need a little bit of help from everybody. I'm from a private university, St. Xavier University. We could not exist without the cooperation and collaboration of the publics as well. We know we take advantage of that sometimes, but we also offer something unique to the consortium. Part of what I'm going to talk about today, I think, is what's unique to the private, but I believe that a lot of what I'm talking about is a matter of scale rather than public and private. So occasionally I may actually ask you to, with a show of hands, to say, does this resonate for the public schools as well as the private schools? So there's some things going on here. And I just started, a couple of you may have heard of this before. Whenever you predict the future, you need to be careful. And so I was at a law conference once, and somebody was getting ready to have a prayer that the lawyers say. And it's, may my words be sweet, for I fear I will be eating them again tomorrow. So we're going to talk about three ways to look at this stuff. The factors and the influences that are hitting us, the questions and challenges, and then the possible actions that CARLI can help us with. So when we're talking about the factors and influences, these are not surprising to anybody, but these are the things that are impinging upon us on a regular basis. They're changing user behaviors. People expect 24/7 access to everything to be online. They don't understand the difference between sharing legally and not sharing. They're trained to work as teams in college, and they go out and they work at one pharmaceutical company, and then they move to another pharmaceutical company, and they share information across those lines. We've trained them to do that, and not only is it illegal, but it's also probably against most of their contracts. They all want a single search box to a certain extent. They don't really want to learn to do sophisticated searches, although there are still a few people who do. And when they see the new facets that are up on the side now, they actually get excited about it. But it has to be a good, intelligent, visual interface for them to accept that. And the other part is that we really need to move more and more into critical thinking and into navigation options. We now provide these tools, but they're not very well seen. We provide citation tracking and altmetrics and other things, but they're not really out in the common vocabulary yet. They are new and interesting ways. Everybody agrees that citations are not necessarily the best way to track impact factor. There are now things we can do to bring the credentials of these things up for students as researchers as well as for faculty for promotion and tenure. So we need to bring that up high. There's also issues of space. We all feel pressure. People want parts of the library to use for other things. I bet there's not a person here who hasn't been contacted. You have these offices, can an adjunct faculty come and use it or something else. So we also have traditional things we want to do in our library, but we have new kinds of behaviors that we need to create spaces for. Maker spaces is the current buzzword for some of these kinds of things. I'm not convinced that we all need 3D printers just to have a 3D printer, but there are scanning capabilities and other things, and creation spaces that the library should be. Interdisciplinary creation spaces, and that's where we want to go. The way to handle the challenge for space is going to be what we call blended services. Some libraries have their own buildings, some are within a building already with other people. The idea that I've come up with this time is called Frustration Room. We have an area in our library that's a beautiful glass enclosed room, and it's got a nice table. And what we do is during midterms and during finals, we bring in student services people, the tutors, and the others, and we're all in that room. And the students know it's a frustration room. They're having a problem. They don't even know what the problem is. They walk into that room and they blurt out what's bothering them. And the people who can help them come together around them and work together in a team to solve that problem. It's not only good for the student, but it's sometimes the only time I've ever been able to actually teach the student tutors how to do library work. So there's a mutual benefit for that. Everybody learns in the process of solving some of this problem. So creative uses of it, where you don't lose the space, but you use it to build up a better. Budgets have to be talked about. Budgets result in changing staffing patterns, new tasks, reduced funds. New service points, reduced service points, blended service points, all of these kind of things come up everywhere. Just-in-time collections rather than just-in-case collections. We've all seen patient-driven acquisitions moving more and more. That's good for some reasons and bad for others. As we move more toward patient-driven acquisitions, especially electronic, the sharing capability disappears, and that's a real concern when we relied on sharing, especially as a smaller private school. Now I'm not contributing as much, and I'm not benefiting as much from CARLI, even though we're all really creative. We're creative to the benefit of the publisher, perhaps, rather than ourselves in some cases. And then there's always the unknowns that surprise us along the way. The last thing I think about these is it doesn't matter how good we are at doing what we do. If we're not embedded into the place where the users are, into their classroom spaces, it's not going to matter. We're going to be outsourced. Okay? And so the things that CARLI will help us do is to see best practices on how you do embed into the virtual desktops for the faculty, the online course tools, remote distance learning support. These are the kind of things we are being faced with. So, what are some of the questions and challenges outside of that? One of them is, do we customize our services or do we centralize our services? This is a standard administrative question. Do we get a benefit from an economy of scale by working together, but what do we lose in terms of customization at that point? And where is that balance? Sometimes it's more important to customize than it is to have something cheap. So one thing we can always do is no matter how much centralized we have to emphasize our local materials, our special collections, the things that our students can uniquely touch, and embed those into the classroom whenever we possibly can. That's the advantage that we always will have, whether we centralize everything else. And hands-on learning is what students really do get excited about. Another challenge for us is, and somebody mentioned this before, we can do some sort of staff sharing at the CARLI lab. But what are we looking at in terms of staffing? Are we going to get rid of subject librarians unless they're absolutely essential? Does it have to be a language skill that they maintain? Does it have to be some kind of a special vocabulary like chemistry? Can we clump a lot of other people together into a generalist? And then we can use that safe position to handle technology like data and GIS or higher level instruction support. Where is that balance going to be, and how many subject librarians we need versus generalists and technologists? These are questions that CARLI can help us with also. IT support is great centralized, but it doesn't work very well for your local conditions. Your printers work different. Your scanners work different. Your ILL and your choice of your citation management tools are different. They're applied differently depending on what your local resources are. So as much as we think CARLI is going to help us, there's a lot of local things that are going to be issues. Last thing for some of us is if you're dealing with grants, you have data management plan requirements that you have to meet. This is a great place for CARLI to help us. We can't always rely on Purdue to give us all the tools. We really do need to start doing something a little bit more local in these kind of areas. We did talk earlier about collection development, shared cooperative collection development. I think an issue that we need to think about is what are we trying to do here? Are we trying to save money by buying the same resources and sharing them? Or are we trying to reapply money to extend even further the type of materials that we buy from the consortium? We were talking earlier, music is an example of that. The Ivies have a cooperative collection development for composers, and they break it down. Brown buys composers from A to D, and Yale buys from E to J, and they're able to really expand what they buy now. That's an intentional decision, but it may be that you don't want to commit, or you're only going to commit to some disciplines but not others. This is the kind of thing that we're going to have to look at. Expanding or saving is one of the questions. This is a private issue, I think. The scale of some of the arrangements that we make, some of the negotiations, licenses, is very problematic for small schools like me. I am a small school, but many publishers don't have tiered pricing models for as small as I am. And so even the smallest, lowest tiers are killing for me. On the other hand, if they're basing it on FTE, I have a small FTE, but I have a really powerful nursing school. So, in a way, I'm getting benefit, somebody else is subsidizing me in that case. So when we start to look at consortial arrangements and pricing, the size of your individual program may be more important than your FTE of your school, and that has to be looked at in terms of pricing models. That, I guess, is true probably across publics as well. You're a small public with a very strong program, or imagine the other way around. You're a big public program, but you just canceled your geography department. You're still paying top dollar for geo route because you have a high FTE. So those are the kind of things we need to look at. Use-based as well as size-based. Document delivery, we use this very well amongst ourselves. We have very well hidden costs for document delivery amongst CARLI. There are reports that are done saying, it costs this much to have the affiliated software, it costs this much to have a staff member, it costs this much for delivery. But when we then compare that to $35 for document delivery, we're really not comparing equally and honestly. There's a very large cost into library alone. Maybe sometimes in some disciplines, commercial document delivery by CCC or reprint desk might be a better solution. If you look at staffs that are shrinking at the same time, because those are the questions going to get there. And then the return on investment that we just talked about a minute ago, clearly everything is going to be looked at. Most of the small schools like me, we have to make up next year at least $28,000 in inflation in journals. And it doesn't matter how much of a cost per use value I get from some of my package plans, I need that money. I'm going to have to cancel that plan. So it doesn't matter if Carly's got a great price for me. I just don't have the money. I need to generate revenue. So I'm going to break package plans that I've had traditionally, even though they're a good value, because I need the freedom to take that money and pay for something else. That's a painful thing. It's harder when you're smaller and you're private, because you don't have the overlap to start with that you may have when you're public. So again, this has been talked about before, so we can go through it quickly. Cooperative collection development. One of the things I think CARLI can really do is help us all understand how to do this right and best. There are many people that are doing cost per use analysis, but they're all doing it differently. They're all using that information differently. They may not be presenting it in a visceral way that stakeholders can understand. Some people may be very good at that. CARLI should be sharing that. We should have a site that talks about this is the method for cost per use for your type of tool. This is the way you present it in an important and valuable and powerful way to your stakeholders. Sometimes it's the raw data, but more often it's the projection of what that means. And if you're talking to an administrator, they don't care about the raw data. They want to be warned in advance of what the negative impact is if this trend continues. We should be able to share those kind of things amongst ourselves so we're all powerful advocates for the right ways to demonstrate this kind of thing. Again, the new tools for information fluency, the tutorials we build, the testing that demonstrates for administration, that it makes a difference. Now, there's a difference between causation and correlation. You may go through a library program and you may do better. That's not necessarily true. That's actually why it happens. But at least you can say it correlates in some case. We're doing that where we are. This year, we forced every freshman and transfer student to take a 2-tutorial, 8-question online test. And I can tell my administration now, the first time, that 85% of the students that are coming to our university have a demonstrated understanding and ability to operate in a library that they could never have been able to document before. And that campus love, because we're coming up to Higher Learning Commission. And we are going to be accredited. And they want to know outcomes, they want to know impacts. And this is the kind of thing that we should be sharing. Look at how we're doing it, look at how we wrote it up. You're coming up for accreditation too. Learn from what we've already learned. I'm sure there's a bunch of people in this room that are doing the same thing. It'd be great to share that kind of experience and technique. There was the conversation again about sharing staff, effectiveness and appropriateness. There's something called service quality reviews. We should be doing environmental scans across our libraries and saying, what's the best methods of doing these kind of things? They don't always work right in every environment, but in many cases, there's best practices that could be adopted either in a shared way or in an individual way. You have to tailor them, but we have amazing capabilities here. We don't necessarily review them in many ways we could. We talked about protecting space and blending with others. We did start to play here with electronic books. What we didn't do was the satisfaction studies that we need to. We're the group to do that. We should be able to now go out and say, we have a whole population of people that have free access to these books. They're using them. Let's ask them now, are they satisfactory replacements? Are they supplements? What are the issues that we need to be dealing with? We are the perfect population for that. It's not a small population. It's a large number of types of organizations that can be testing whether it's different situations that make e-books the right tool to use. So we just need to coordinate that kind of activity. We're doing a grant-based electronic textbook alternative program, and I'm sure others are doing the same thing. We all have textbook problems. Our private school works with underprivileged students, so textbooks are a high priority for us. Open educational resources is something we're looking at, the free available materials out there, and building new things if they're not out there. I'm sure everybody in this room has that same concern. We should be working together as CARLI to be developing manuals to help people understand when to use open educational resources, when commercial tools are effective methods, and how to build shared materials. Not just shared amongst us, but shared out in the open educational resources consortia or commons, as they call it. And we should be working to get these administrations to give credit to faculty members who build these kind of tools. The reason that it's not happening is they don't get promotion and tenure credit for building something they give away that's not peer reviewed. If we can make a position statement, these are really important for our students and the costs, that should give those tenure and promotion tickets the ability to put a higher value on those things in terms of research and in terms of service, if not in terms of other areas. So these are the power and leverage things we talked about earlier. The last thing is the thing that's always traditional providers. We should be working with the administration, with the campus, to leverage what we're good at. We're good at standards and protocols and metadata and linking and sharing and privacy. And we should have a CARLI set of standard ways that we demonstrate this knowledge to our administrations that we can turn to. We can say, look, this is what we do. Here's examples from each of our schools of how it's mattered and the best practices to do this. This is what we need to do to survive. We need to demonstrate this kind of expertise before we are outsourced. And then, again, what we were talking about before is how do we effectively communicate our value to campus administrators? Yes, we can measure, but we can't just measure numbers. We have to measure impact. We have to measure consequences. We have to talk about the hidden values. You never got any credit for the fact that faculty members don't have to walk to the library and make photocopies of their articles anymore. Right? This is a value that we have offered for years that we've never in any way claimed that credit in some way. We need to be more strategic about, as a group, figuring out how to do this kind of thing. Again, building the partnerships with the administration is key, because then they'll give you more money to do you. So this is just some of the challenges and some of the areas I think in which in the future CARLI is positioned correctly to be the place where we do it in a collaborative, strategic way. There are groups looking at all these things. Now what we need to do is get product